He is back here on the Rich Eisen Show. Thrilled to have Mike Doc Emrick. How are you, Doc?
I'm good, and Chara has been in a lot of NHL rinks this spring, about the same time the playoffs have been going on. So she made your list, is that right?
She did not, Mike. She got the proverbial snub.
Oh, she did not? Okay.
Unfortunately.
I heard her mention, that's all.
What has Chara been doing in hockey rinks, Doc?
She's been having concerts.
Oh,
I'm trying to think of the ones that she was usually in ahead of us or after us in some of these arenas this spring.
I just didn't know. I just didn't know if she was like the first star of the game, Mike. I just didn't know. She came out there on the ice and waved.
She would have to have suited up and played. Reggie Jackson has been in one of the arenas in San Jose. We've had a lot of stars hanging around in these various places, but no, not Chara. She did not attend a game.
Well, John Hamm.
It's good to talk to you guys.
It's great to talk to you too. John Hamm has been front and center in St. Louis and has truly given a face and a voice, obviously, to a bunch of Blues fans that have been waiting for moments like, obviously, Game 2, but more in particular, Game 4, where they could personally eyeball what is going on. With Pat Mahomes was there and Jenna Fisher. Just, again, people were just giving voice to the St. Louis. What was it like to witness that moment there?
It was fun being a part of it. It's always fun to be a part of an exciting event like this. But I think also to see our game is a collision game. Man, I've talked to NFL players who marvel at the fact that these guys can play 4 of these in a week's time. And it was another one of those ultimate collision games that had a lot of chaos built into it. But at the end, there are a lot of times that you can't improve on anything with words. And so for the last 15 seconds or so, I just said nothing because we don't need crowd mics in a place like St. Louis. You just let the crowd dictate what's going on, and the crowd just yelled itself hoarse. And that's the first time they'd ever won a Stanley Cup final game in their own city, and so we let them have it. And we let the organist play the St. Louis Blues song, and we let the horn sound, and people gather around the goaltender and let the pictures tell the story. It was an exciting atmosphere, just like Boston will be, because it always is when they pass the banner around. They've had Bill Belichick there to wave the banner. They've had Bobby Orr to do it, too. I don't know who they're going to come up with tomorrow night, but it'll be fun to find out.
Yeah, I know. It has been just an exciting playoff, as always, and then this series. What are you hearing at all about Chara and his broken jaw and what you think is so important for him to be out there on the ice on Thursday night, Doc?
We have not heard anything yet today. One heartening thing is that Matt Grzelcyk, who was wounded by the suspension bringing a check from Oscar Sundqvist, did take part. And a non-contact jersey and was part of the practice on the second power play unit. So that was a heartening thing in that there may be a possibility there. But they're holding off any announcement, at least so far, on what Chara's possibility can be. He's the inspirational guy on that team. And even though he did not participate in the fourth and clinching game down in Raleigh, he was the first guy out on the ice at the horn and rallied around the team and was the leader in the handshake line after. These are rallying things that are so much a part of Stanley Cup lore, and I'm sure it's the same in other sports, though I've not been around them so closely as I have hockey, Rich. But these are the emotional bonds that teams form as they get to a final after they've gone through 6 weeks of all of this punishment. And so you know that he didn't have any... There was no reason that he could play in the third period of the fourth game, but he wanted to be there for his team. And at one point, he went up and down the bench, encouraging his team as best he could. And with the injury he had, I don't know how he could do a lot of encouraging and have to talk, but he did his best, and that's what you see so much of it this time of year.
6-time Emmy Award winner Doc Emrick here in the Honda Insider Report, getting set to call Game 5 on NBC tomorrow night in Boston. Where does the Blues story rank for you, Doc? I mean, a team that was in literally dead last a few days into our calendar year in 2019, turning to a young goaltender catching fire, playing Laura Branigan's Gloria based on them drinking in Philadelphia one night before everything started, and watching a bar break out in that song, and that becomes their their rallying cry, an interesting choice of song, but altogether they go from dead last now to 2 wins away from hoisting the cup for a city that's been dying to see it for the first time. Where does that all rank for you?
Well, in the 46 years I've been around this, it's right now it's in the top 10 all time in the stories that I could possibly tell about a run, and it would be top 5, if not at the very top, if they pull it off, because you just don't have that many rags to riches finishes. The Minnesota North Stars in 1991 were a story that was similar to that, in that they upset so many teams, including Chicago, which had won the President's Trophy, and then St. Louis, and then the defending champion Oilers to get to the final before they got pretty well taken into camp by the Pittsburgh Penguins. But this is one, if they pull it off, it'll be an ultimate story and a Cinderella story to write forever. We had one of those last year. And it would have been an even greater story if Vegas would have been able to win the championship. But it turned out to be a magnificent story regardless, just because of all that Vegas came through. We're just fortunate that we get stories like this seemingly every season in hockey. And occasionally it's a story that gets written right into the Stanley Cup final. And that's what we've got this year.
Have you ever drank out of the cup, Doc?
No. No, I never have. I've always been sort of a neutral party watching other people celebrate it before. Mm-hmm. But no, I've never had that opportunity. When I was in Portland, Maine in the American League, we had a group of guys that were Philadelphia Flyers farm team in the 70s. And, of course, the Flyers were very well known in the 70s. They won 2 Stanley Cups themselves. And they tailored their team in Portland to be very much like the Flyers team in Philadelphia was. In that they had plenty of scrappers and plenty of scorers. And so we won 2 consecutive championships in Portland. The Calder Cup was much smaller, but it had a bowl that held lots of champagne, and the players held it for me to drink champagne from then. But nope, never since.
So is it a professionalism thing that you have not done it? Is it just it's not been offered to you? Doc?
No, and I'm always with a neutral party. You know,
sure.
I'm not a part of a team anymore, and so no, I never wind up down. First of all, the dressing room is so jammed with people that it would not be a party I'd be invited to begin with, because they've had people that have weathered the storm all year to be with them, and secondly, I guess. Secondly is the first one. It's just not a party I'm invited to, but I sure enjoy watching people celebrate.
Okay, I understand that, but I would love to just see that photograph one day for you.
Well, I don't know that it'll ever happen, but the one thing's for sure, the people that have it. I remember Alexander Ovechkin's celebration last year.
Right.
I don't know that anyone's ever enjoyed it more than he did, because he had suffered so long.
I think it's still going, actually, Doc. I don't know if we've checked on him at any point in time, but it might actually still be going. If that celebration ever happens, I will get a picture and I will send it to you. Okay, right? I'd love that. I would love that.
8 by 10.
I will take that. So what is the key, do you think, over the next, obviously Game 5, but potentially over the next 3 games, and if we were so blessed by Game 7 for you to call on NBC, what do you think is the key here to lifting the cup for either team?
The strangest thing, and it's so trite, but the team that gets to do what it wants to do. And we've had 2 games of both teams getting to do what they wanted to do. With the Blues, it's being disciplined and applying their forecheck, which they were able to do effectively twice, and they lost their discipline a couple of times. And for the Bruins, it's getting to do what they want to do and apply their game, which is rushing 5 men at a time and using their power play. And each of these games has taken on a different life of its own. And just about the time you think someone has momentum, they don't. And so each game is its own entity, and that's why Game 5 is going to be so exciting. And if you think that whoever wins Game 5 has got the leg up on Game 6, I think you're going to be dead wrong. So I think we're going 7.
That would be great. That would just be awesome. Last one for you, Doc, is one of the more moving moments that I've witnessed was you winning your Emmy a couple of years ago, one of them, and you gave out your email address for young kids to reach out to you if they want to get into play-by-play. You did it again this past year. Have you received any emails? Has anybody actually taken you up on that, Doc?
Oh, yes. And you know what happens is, and they do it, and I encourage them to, because it's a great business to be in, isn't it, Rich? I mean, you go to play every day, and if you're doing play-by-play, you get a great seat for the game. You get in free, and you get to work with wonderful people, and you get to be around these athletes. And I found the hockey guys just to be magnificent. But also, it winds up being a great living, whether you're working in a small community where you're a very important part of the community, or whether you get to do national games. It's a great living. And yes, I have heard from a number of aspiring broadcasters, and I've actually asked a couple of them to resend all of the material that they sent, because it does take up a good deal of memory, and I don't get to do these until August. By then, the free agency period is over, the draft is over, and all of the things that take up a lot of memory I have been deleted, and now I've got time to really sort through and give the proper time to listening to them, and some of them are really good, and some of them I have some suggestions for, and then I hear back from them. And one last thing, I am very pleased, not that I had anything to do with it, that Jack Michael, the announcer in Edmonton, and John Walton, the announcer in Washington, both years ago sent me some of their material from the minor leagues, and now they're not sending material out anymore because they made it.
They have made it. And I'll tell you, Doc, before I let you go here, I was fortunate to call my first NFL game for the NFL Network last year in London. And I've been very fortunate, again, to do what I do for a living. I can't remember as much fun as I've had on the job, just describing action and going with the flow and figuring out when to shut up and let the crowd tell the story, as you mentioned before, your decision to make at the end of Game 4 with St. Louis fans celebrating their first ever home Stanley Cup win. It's an endeavor that is so rewarding, and in watching somebody like you make it look so easy, it's just amazing. It really is.
Thank you for saying that, Rich, and it's a great observation you had, even at the end of a game like you had there in London, and just multiply that times having done 100 of those, you can imagine the adrenaline rush that somebody like myself still gets from years of doing that. But I hope you get a chance to do another 1,000 of those, because it is fun. And one thing that a guy named Bill Clement taught me years ago when I was working at ESPN, he and I were doing national games together, and one of his advices to me was, don't bring the game in your briefcase. Have all of your preparation done, but don't try to force things in, because it'll sound forced. And the athletes are human beings, and they're going to deliver you a game. And be ready to adjust to whatever you might have in your mind, but don't force it, because you may be way off track if you try to jam something in. And I've always tried to remember that. Billy gave me lots of great advice, and he and I used to do a training camp together when the players weren't there. We would practice doing interviews, practice working in front of a mirror. And I always thought that was a great thing to do. He was very influential in any success that I had.
Well, Doc, look forward to Game 5 Thursday night and more, and it's always a pleasure for me to have you calling into the show. So thanks for doing that.
Okay, Rich. Thank you. It's great to talk to you.
You bet. That's Doc Emrick, NBC Sports, calling in from Boston.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download the Rich Eisen Show app.